So the main levels are cool. They mostly serve as a way to introduce players to mechanics. So why not put them on a tier list? Stereo Madness is the first level of the game and doubles as a tutorial. It teaches you the basics of jumping and flying without hand-holding you the entire way, which is how all tutorials should be. But most importantly, it has the right difficulty. It's a good challenge for new players and a nice breeze for more experienced players. S tier. Back on Track and Polargeist are the same story, both of which introducing a new mechanic without any tutorial. However, they both have a lot of parts where you just jump and fall, which was already taught in all of Stereo Madness. It's fine to have a couple of these, but these levels have too many of these for my liking. A tier. Dryout is the fourth level and is supposed to teach you that your gravity can flip, and it does so in a really nice and easy way to learn. However, Upside Down is only used once throughout the entire level. B tier. I'm gonna be honest, but Base After Base and Can't Let Go are basically the same level. Like, look at this footage and tell me if this is Base After Base or Can't Let Go. And it was actually neither. This is my own level. I think they both get C tier because they aren't really that special, just a more difficult version of Dryout. Jumper, however, is a completely different story. It teaches you upside down ship, but also only uses it once. It's fine though, because Jumper feels more like a challenge level, given the fact that it was the last level in Update 1.0. The rest of the level is a more spiced up version of Stereo Madness. B tier. Time Machine is the 8th level in the game and introduces mirror portals, and while many people hate them, just like me, I think that Time Machine actually uses them really well. People tend to sleep on Time Machine, as it's one of the more forgettable levels, but the gameplay goes hard. But just like Base After Base and Can't Let Go, Time Machine just isn't all that interesting. It feels like the gameplay is very repetitive and a bit janky. C tier. Cycles introduces the ball game mode, which also does so in a really nice way, even giving you some arrows of encouragement. After the first ball part, it goes into a ship with constant gravity changes. It's pretty difficult for new players, but it's really not that bad after some practice. The second ball is kind of a challenge, testing how well your understanding of the ball is. It's also a bit copy and paste, but not that much, and besides, who am I to complain when beating it gives you a really cool icon? Overall, I'd say it's an A tier. X-Step introduces the blue pad, but this time it doesn't do so in a really nice way. Your first interaction is in a classic pre-drop, which makes it unclear what it does. Then it uses it in a ship part? Come on! Next part uses them properly, and it would be a good challenge in how well you can wrap your head around it, but it doesn't have a proper introduction. This is not good level design. The gameplay is fine if you're an experienced player who knows all the mechanics, but not everybody has been playing for that long. D tier. Alright, we're 3 minutes into the video and have only 10 levels ranked. I know your attention span is already fried, so let's speedrun the next few levels. Clutterfunk, S tier, introduces Mini by shrinking down the level itself as well as exploring it to its fullest ability. Theory of Everything, B tier, introduces the UFO nicely, but the gameplay isn't that interesting. Electroman Adventures, D tier, it's really not that interesting. Clubstep, A tier, it's challenging, filled with memory, and a great introduction to demon levels. Electrodynamics, B tier, nice introduction to speed, but its difficulty scares away newer players to the point where Hexagon Force has to teach them. Speaking of which, Hexagon Force gets A tier. It's a really good introduction to dual mode and slopes that's in a way which is immediately understandable. Also, 40% isn't that bad. Blast Processing, S tier, introduces the wave in the most satisfying way and it's just a fun level. Theory 2 also gets S tier. It's a super fun demon, and putting it any lower would make Mako angry with me. Geometrical Dominator, B tier. It introduces the robot really well, but moving objects are shown off as if they've just always been in the game. As much as I love Deadlocked, it unfortunately gets C tier because of its gameplay. Oh, that's enough of that. I think I'm gonna rank the rest of these levels normally, starting with Finger Dash. Finger Dash introduces the spider game mode, rotating objects, the 3 new orbs, instant count triggers, a new tile. Yeah, you get the point. And while all this might seem overwhelming, Finger Dash just makes it work. And not just that, but the gameplay is super fun and makes you feel awesome. In fact, I'm putting Finger Dash above S tier and into the W tier. Dash is kinda like Finger Dash, introducing lots of new features, but this time it does feel a bit overwhelming, as if it was throwing all the new features in your face. Fortunately, the only hectic part is the beginning, so it's all smooth sailing after that. The swing copter is introduced nicely, Sideways would have been introduced nicely, and overall, it's a good level, A tier. The 7 Seas is supposed to be a more Stereo Madness-like level, teaching you how to play the game. However, tutorials should be simple, and while the 7 Seas is simple for the most part, it does have its confusing parts like this coin and these lasers, A tier. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, we will be ranking the spin-off games. Viking Arena is supposed to mimic Back on Track, but it also has more of the confusing things as seen in the 7 Seas, so it gets C tier for all the same reasons as the 7 Seas, just more confusing things. I want to assume that Airborne Robots was supposed to teach you about jump orbs, which it does, but it feels more like a challenge level, kinda like Jumper. It's not bad, so I think it deserves B tier. Payload is just like the 7 Seas, acting like a Stereomatics-like tutorial. However, Payload doesn't introduce the ship, so I don't think it can be as high as the 7 Seas. B tier. Beast Mode is the same story as Payload, but Back on Track instead of the 7 Seas. B tier. Machina is supposed to teach you the ship game mode, but Years just does it better. Other than that, it's fine. C tier. Years is just a ship challenge. Not much else to say, so it gets C tier. Frontlines isn't really that special. It introduces Upside Down, but Frontlines feels shorter than all the other levels, making it feel kind of underwhelming. D tier. Space Pirates, however, is a really good level, and introduces UFO in a fun way with fun gameplay to go along with its fun song. A tier. Striker kills me on the inside. It could have introduced so many things like the robot, but it shows off the mirror portal, which isn't used anywhere else in the game or in modern day Geometry Dash. But worst of all, the gameplay just sucks. F tier. Embers isn't all that interesting, just a tutorial for the ball. C tier. Round 1 isn't that interesting. D tier for obvious reasons. Monster Dance Off introduces the wave, but since half of the level is just mediocre cube gameplay, it gets C tier. Press Start is neat. It serves as yet another introduction to the game, given that it was the first level in Sub-Zero. But unlike Payload, Press Start introduces the ship as well. It even introduces the robot. I think it deserves S tier for all the same reasons as the 7 Seas, just it introduces robot and it makes you feel awesome. Knock'em's not that interesting, as it's basically just a challenge level. It also makes you look and feel cool as you play. B tier. Power Trip is definitely the most forgettable level in Sub-Zero, and I understand why. All of the new features were introduced in Press Start and Knock'em. You could argue that it's a challenge level, but so is Knock'em. It's mostly there as a filler level. D tier. The tower is a good introduction to platformer levels. It has mechanics that just make sense in platformers and that would show up in a lot of other levels. It gets A tier mostly because my impatient monkey brain thinks that this cutscene is way too long. The sewers is the exact same thing, showing off a lot of new features that would show up in platformer levels. It gets B tier because it is pretty short. The cellar is going right into C tier because it also feels really short, not to mention that lots of features were already introduced. The only reason it's this high is because it introduces the robot and platformer. And lastly, we have the Secret Hollow. It's definitely a challenge compared to the other platformers, and it's super cool and creative. My only complaint is that after you turn into the ball, it's kinda boring until the boss fight. Speaking of which, it definitely could have been improved. All you do is run left and right and sometimes jump. Even just adding some platforms could have helped. My final ranking is C tier. Alright, that's all the levels ranked on a tier list. Here's the final results, pause here if you want to read it, and thanks for watching.